Hello and welcome to our next webinar that we're talking about supporting learners with SEND in an inclusive classroom. I'm really fortunate because today I'm in a school talking to other school leaders about this topic, and it's been really an interesting conversation, and I'm really delighted to welcome Becky to our webinars, because actually from what we've been discussing about and what the landscape of that SEND in general is like at the moment, it's really interesting, and you're going to be in for a treat for how much information and what you can actually learn from Becky about this. So welcome, Becky.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you very much.
And it's not this whole thing about adaptive learning and things like that. It's not a myth. It's things we have to change, isn't it? Essentially.
It is very much, Jonathan, and I'm hoping that today I just give a bit of food for thought for our leaders here today, to just things to take back with them to the school and questions and things to reflect on to move this important aspect of mainstream education forward in their schools.
So
Okay.
I'm going to let you take over, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Jonathan, very much. Hi, everyone. As Jonathan said, my name is Becky Rothwell. I am an SEND advisor at HFL Education. And I'm really pleased today to be with the Head Teacher Chat community to provide you with an hour, as I said, of food for thought on how we can be supporting learners with SEND in mainstream school, in an inclusive classroom. And the aims of our session today is, hopefully, I've got an hour, so it's a short snapshot, but hopefully enough to get you thinking on the importance of knowing our learners within school and how we can support teachers to really get to know the learners in their classroom and how they can best support them. Then looking at some adaptive teaching strategies, reflecting on whether they are taking place in the classroom at the moment or whether this is an area to focus in on and take back within your schools. And then finally looking at planning effective CPD and the role of leaders within that as well, in planning effective CPD for upskilling our teachers and supporting our learners with SEND. Why is it important? Why is it a big focus? Well, very much so at the moment. It is a huge focus due to the high needs of SEND that are within our mainstream schools. It's been around in our teacher standards for a long time, that ability of teachers being able to adapt their teaching to respond to the strengths and needs of all pupils. And we want this to be a collective responsibility. All teachers consistently having that strength, that skills and confidence to be able to support all learners. And this is actually a focus as well within the early career framework. There is a clear standard related to adaptive teaching as well, with an emphasis on whole class teaching. And then some of you may have seen this, not set in stone yet, still under consultation, but the new Ofsted framework that we'll certainly be hearing more about from September this year. And it has a spotlight on adaptive teaching running all the way through it. That focus on teachers having the expertise and knowledge to make well-judged adaptations to overcome barriers to learning for pupils, particularly those with SEND. So how can we support our teachers to do this? How can you as leaders support your teachers? I wanted to start off here with the importance of knowing the needs of our learners. This is a really key starting point before we think about our toolkit. And there's a useful quote here from Margaret Mulholland recently that she wrote for TES. And she said, we need more than a repertoire of strategies and an in an adaptive toolkit, we need to understand how to use the knowledge of our learners to identify the best strategies to use and when. So how well do our teachers know the barriers to learning that their students have and the pupils in their class have? How well do they know those needs? So I'm just going to provide you on the next few slides just some useful little activities that we focus on within our training within schools, and some resources that may be useful. So if we start off here, this is actually from the Education Endowment Foundation, and their Send in Mainstream Schools guidance. Some of you may or may not be familiar with this, but here this is a useful starting point looking at the 4 broad areas of need. We often get teachers to reflect and place where their pupils sit within these 4 broad areas. 1, to ensure that they know their pupils and the needs that they face, but also to look at patterns. Often there's an overlap of needs within pupils, that intersectionality. Often then they can see patterns across the school. You can see patterns across the school, but also patterns within classrooms. And that can really be useful to inform the provision that you put in place. So for instance, if you have a particular high prevalence of communication and interaction needs in a particular cohort or across the school, then really focusing in on those strategies to support those learners would be really beneficial. So really thinking about visuals that might be in place, that focus on language and vocabulary, on supporting students to process instructions and the language that's around them. Similarly, if there's high cognition and learning, supporting teachers to reflect then and go, well, am I slowing down my instructions? Am I using those appropriate strategies to really support those learners? We also have quite an interesting discussion about those identified with social, emotional and mental health. Often that's children who are diagnosed with ADHD, but often it's that reflection time on where is that social, emotional, mental health need coming from. And it could well be that actually it is the barrier to learning, a root barrier of communication and interaction needs or cognition and learning needs, that is causing that social, emotional and mental health difficulty. So actually, if we're pitching something too high, or we're not providing, the teacher's not providing the right scaffolds or support on language and vocabulary, then a child's defense mechanism is going to kick in, that fight, flight, fright response. And that's going to be seen and observed as a social, emotional, and mental health need. So really unpicking and exploring the needs within your schools and also within individual classrooms as well can be a really useful starting point. And this is just some of the barriers to learning that some of our learners may face under the 4 broad areas of need. This isn't a definitive list at all. I've just put some on there. But are teachers upskilled and aware of these barriers? And are teachers supporting these needs effectively? So we don't want we're not necessarily looking for the label when we're exploring these needs. We want to empower teachers to talk about the learning needs that these students have so that they're empowered to support them, because they may think, I don't know how to support someone with ADHD, or I don't know how to support somebody who has sensory and physical needs. But actually, if we look at their learning needs, how can we support a student to be motivated? Or how can we support them with organising their learning, organising their thinking, and structuring their thoughts and ideas? So once we look at the need, we can help empower teachers to support them in the best way. Asking questions such as, what are the barriers when planning? What are the barriers to learning of my students, and how can I help them overcome those barriers? Another useful tool that we like to use within our training and support within schools, and this is to empower teachers to be curious, support teachers to be curious about their learners. We often give blank icebergs to teachers to reflect on individual learners, but completing the iceberg can be done by the teacher, but could also be done with parents and with the child themselves to say, well, this is what we're seeing on the surface. This is what we know and what we have observed, or what the pupil has told us, and then exploring what could be going on underneath the surface. So if they're relying heavily on adult support, why is that? Are they not able to follow the instructions? Are they finding it difficult to organise their ideas? Do they understand the lesson that's being taught? Is it pitched at the right level? So really exploring underneath the surface can then again support the teacher to go, right, okay, they're not understanding the vocabulary, I'll focus in on that and really make sure that they embed that knowledge, and I can support them with a visual or breaking it down into more detail. That clear reflection, giving teachers that blank copy, as I said, to support them to reflect on individual learners, and added to these underlying causes as well, we could add in there Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of that emotional aspect, the physical and emotional needs that children have. We know that children may come into lessons hungry, or there may be an emotional aspect from home or in the playground that they're bringing in that causes that barrier to prevent them from being able to learn effectively. So all these factors and completing these with the pupils and the parents will allow us to get a wider picture, a wider knowledge of these students. Within secondary school, this may well be something that if teachers are aware that an iceberg can be carried out, they could ask the SEN team to do this, or they could do it themselves within departments or head of department meetings, and then taking that concern to the SENCO will then enable the SENCO to support them in the best way, or subject leaders as well. And as I said, we want to remove the obstacle. I love this quote: if a child can't learn the way we teach, maybe we should teach the way they learn. Thinking about what is the learning that we want them to learn in that lesson. This is what we want. Are your teachers thinking about this? What is the key learning? And therefore, if there's a barrier in the way of that key learning, how can we overcome it? For example, if we want the child to gather data and analyse data in a science investigation or in a maths lesson, but they struggle to use a ruler and draw a straight line, then let's provide them with the table to record that data. If we want them to find out about an aspect of Roman life or another time in history, but they struggle to read, let's pre-read a text with them. Or let's simplify the information that we're giving the class, or let's pre-teach keywords or provide a video clip to help support them. If we want them to tell us what they have found out in a science investigation, because that's the key learning, we want them to explain the science, but they struggle to organise their ideas and thoughts, let's give them a word bank. Let's give them some sentence structures, and let's provide them with voice-to-text software or a writing frame to record their ideas. So we need to think, what is the learning? How can I support the child to achieve it? And how can I support them to overcome any barriers to learning that they may face? So what strategies should we see in an inclusive classroom? As the OSA toolkit is saying, that we want teachers to be able to adapt, have the expertise to make appropriate and well-judged adaptations, help pupils to overcome the most significant barriers to learning. And I've just put this quote up here. This was a recent quote that I found in my reading by an Associate Professor of Initial Teacher Education. You can see March 2025. And you can read it, you can see it on the slide, but actually the key question here is, what is the definition of adaptive teaching that you have within your school? And actually Ofsted are very much focusing in, and the DFE within their work, within SEND, this is a conversation that they're having. What is the definition? If you Googled it, lots of different things would come up. But the main thing is, what is your shared vision within your school of adaptive teaching and support for SEND? You might have a provision overview, a provision map that shows that. You might have some non-negotiables or something that you have discussed with teachers that you expect to see in the classroom. But is there a shared vision of what adaptive teaching means? That identification of potential barriers, and then how do we modify our instruction and support them? And similarly, what's in the curriculum toolbox? What is in a teacher's toolbox to support learners with SEND? Your local authority may have their own guidance on, it could be termed ordinarily available provision. That's something in Hertfordshire we're working on at the moment, or universal provision. But if not, think about what do you call the provision for all in your school? And is there a provision map or a provision overview so that new teachers to your school and experienced teachers know exactly what they should be providing within their classroom? Does everyone know what is expected of them? Thinking about, is there a consistent approach with everyone knowing the strategies to be implemented? And is this clearly communicated across all subject leaders, all subject areas, sorry. And I'll talk a bit later about the involvement of subject leaders. Is time given for them to reflect on what does inclusive adaptive teaching look like in my subject, and how can I communicate that to all the teachers in the school or all the teachers within my department? So that consistent approach, what's in your curriculum toolbox? This is an area that we focus in on. Again, this is the Education Endowment Foundation, and many of you may be familiar with the 5-a-day principle, the recommended strategies. And within their document that I've pictured there on the right-hand side, they state that pupils with SEND have the greatest need for excellent teaching and are entitled to provision that supports achievement at and enjoyment of school. And this is underpinned by the SENCO Code of Practice, which states that high quality teaching is the first step in responding to pupils who have or may have SEND. So what's great about the Education Endowment Foundation is they have done, for those who aren't familiar with it, they have done the research for us. They found the strategies that are evidence-based that support our pupils with SEND. And you can see here the 5 elements that they recommend: instruction, cognitive and metacognitive strategies, scaffolding, flexible grouping, and using technology. And I wonder how many of you are, how far you are in your journey on implementing something like this. You may have your own approaches that you found in reading that you're focusing in on. That could well be, I know I was in a school the other day who are pushing Rose and Shine's principles of instruction. And there is overlap. So with explicit instruction within the EEF, it talks a lot about small steps and planning for that. And that comes within Rose and Shine's presenting new material in small steps. So there is overlap. So whatever approach you use, think about how we're supporting teachers to embed that in the classroom. Again, you might have local authority guidance that suggests strategies that teachers should be using within their classrooms. And the main thing to consider here is, to a great extent, good teaching for pupils with SEND is good teaching for all. And we very much try and get that message across, that if we put these strategies in place as part and parcel of our teaching, we are supporting all our learners, not just those with SEND. So within explicit instruction, we could start off with planning. So before we even get into the lesson, thinking about when we're delivering that lesson, when we're about to start, have we got a clear lesson objective? And the emphasis here is the importance of small steps. So a reflection for you as head teachers here is, are subject leaders aware of how their subject is taught in the classroom? Can they see clear progression with outcomes? And if they walked into a classroom, can they see a clear lesson objective focus that they know that all students are working towards that objective, including those with SEND? And then within that is the focus on language and vocabulary. If we go back to our 4 broad areas of need and those that communication and language need that comes through, is there a strong focus on language and vocabulary? Because often that can provide a barrier to a child's learning, is that understanding of what am I learning here, what vocabulary am I embedding and understanding? And thinking about those small steps, are teachers delving deep enough into the vocabulary and really building on, this is what we learned before, this is what we're learning now, this is our next steps moving forward? So I love this visual that you can see here, the importance of small steps, of being able to allow all children to access that learning. And then that anticipation of the learning, what misconceptions may come up that I want to focus in on, and how can I plan for pre-teaching and overlearning? So if we think of pre-teaching, it's to establish the foundations for a single lesson or unit of work. So it helps to identify gaps in knowledge for learners, but also bridging that gap ensures success for that learner as well. So the importance of anticipating, and pre-teaching could be something at the beginning of a lesson that takes place, or before a topic. So again, are subject leaders aware that this is taking place? If not, how can they support teachers to do this, and ensuring that students have the necessary skills to access the lesson in front of them? We also focus in here, we've got the I do, we do, you do. And we use this a lot in our training. And the research says that the guided practice, that bit on the we do in the middle, is often missed. And we've observed this as well. Do your teachers take the time to guide students through their learning? How clear are you about the purpose of modelling to your teachers and how teachers should be structuring their modelling? So in I do, is there a clear step-by-step demonstration? And then are we repeating that and guiding students through it together before then asking students to move onto that independent practice? And this can help students organise their thinking, structure how they're going to tackle the task. And we're modelling to students, how do they complete the task before expecting them to work, as I said, independently, using clear, succinct language in their teaching and checking pupils' understanding often along the way. And part of that could be providing worked examples, modelling mistakes and challenges, and I talk a bit about that a bit further on. But also those strategies within there of think, pair, share, using this time to consolidate learning and check that understanding. And I think often it's that misconception that lots of students may appear to be on board, but it's making sure that the teacher is working with the students that need that extra support, and TAs are fully on board and able to support as well with that we do element, that prompted practice, guiding students through the task. So again, when we walk into lessons, what does that modelling process look like? Is there that guiding of students along the way before we then move into independent? And it could well be that this I do, we do, you do goes over a few lessons. So it's making sure teachers are clear that within a lesson, it doesn't have to be I do, we do, you do straight away. That you do might be something that comes a bit later after we've done the guided practice and the prompted practice together. We've then got scaffolding, and this is very much a focus within lots of schools that we've worked in. It's certainly that starting point. And within the EEF, they say that providing scaffolds allow all students to access the learning. So they focus specifically on visual, verbal, written. And this is really useful for teachers just to think, right, what are my visual scaffolds that I've got in my toolbox? What are my verbal scaffolds? What are my written? So using scaffolding as well in a way that reduces students' reliance on adult support and making sure that it's in a non-stigmatizing way. And this certainly is an issue as children get older, that they don't want to be the only one with that word bank and the one sat there with the sentence frames. They're actually thinking, well, this I'm going to provide within my we do section of explicit instruction altogether, and then it is available for all, and those students with SEND will access it more than students who are working more independently at that time. So thinking about how it can be done in a non-stigmatizing way. And here are some examples. I know lots of you will know what scaffolding is as head teachers, but actually thinking about, is there a consistent way that scaffolds are given? So if task planners are used and now next boards are used, are they done consistently so that when a learner moves into the next classroom, are they provided with a similar framework? So it is familiar with them. There isn't that element of dysregulation of, oh, well, this is different, I'm not sure about this. Is there consistency across every classroom? And similarly, thinking at this time of year is really important to think about transition. So especially from year 6 to year 7, if children have these task planners, these scaffolds, then find out that, especially secondary schools to primary, and primary convey this to secondary schools. Because if that is swiped away from them in year 7 and they don't have a task planner to help them organise their ideas or help them structure their work and their next steps, then there may be an element of dysregulation. So it's that knowing your pupils and knowing your learners on transition from class to class, key stage to key stage. What do they have in place in the classroom? Can we have that in place in their next classroom? And it could be that we gradually remove it. If we think of scaffolding, it is a temporary scaffold that we're looking for, that we gradually remove over time. But certainly on transition, making sure it's in place, making sure there is consistency, that everyone is using the same performer, so there's that familiarity amongst classrooms. And here I've just focused on that importance of retrieval, supporting the child to embed their learning. We want children to know more and remember more. So how are teachers supporting their students to do this? We've already talked about pre-teaching and overlearning, but are there those visuals in front of them to help them to process and organise that information? So you can see the bottom, the left-hand side, the elements, that is a Freya model that just helps, again, that explicit vocabulary instruction unpick the vocabulary for the student. And you can imagine if they have that in their books or if it's up on display, that would be a really useful tool for them to go back to and help really embed and further process that information that they've been given. Those visuals there to support. On the top right, I've got just some examples. This is GCSE command vocabulary, but you could do this for reading comprehension vocabulary, question prompts, so that they understand, and the visual helps them then embed and attach it into their memory of what that word means and what they have to do in response to that word, what it is asking them to do. And graphic organisers, Freya model, that one with elements, that's an example. You can see the advantages and disadvantages. So rather than a blank page, how are teachers supporting their learners to structure the information that they can later put and apply into other tasks. And I've also got in there word banks, flashcards and mnemonics as well. So these strategies to remember, to embed their learning. We then go on to written scaffolds. This can be models of written work, a writing frame to support recording, pupils' own previous work, notes on a whiteboard. And I just wanted to pause on this one because lots of you will know what sentence frames looks like and the support there. This was a classroom that I went into in one school, and it was a 3-challenge task. So one was write a sentence. Challenge 1 was write a sentence about the vulture. Challenge 2 was write a paragraph about the vulture. And challenge 3 was write 3 paragraphs about the vulture. And actually, when I talked to the children on a group that were being supported, in a group that were being supported by a teaching assistant, there was a child there identified with SEND, and he said, I want to do challenge 3, but he had been told to do challenge 1. And actually, it's ensuring we've got those high expectations that actually all of our children, all the children in this class are going to write 3 paragraphs about the vulture. But how can I best support those children identified with SEND, with writing as a barrier and processing and organising information? How can I support them to reach that learning objective of 3 paragraphs? So you can see here I might provide subheadings, a sentence starter. I may well then ask them orally, so lots of talk you'd want at this stage to talk through their ideas, lots of images of the vultures, a video perhaps as well, and me thinking, right, here's my sentence, what would your sentence be? Or can you tell me something else that it looks like? And they're verbally saying it before then writing it or having a go on a whiteboard. So all those scaffolds there to help scaffold the pupil for success. That is the key. High expectations, all towards the same objective, and then how can I scaffold them for success to get there? We then move on to verbal scaffolding. And I could go on about this. I could talk about this for a good hour, but we haven't got the time, unfortunately. And many of you will be familiar with this, but this is from the Education Endowment Foundation, and they've actually just republished, updated their TA guidance, deployment of TA guidance. And so you'll see this in there. And my questions would be to you is, do staff know how to intervene effectively to support the child at the right time? So are they glued to the child? We call it the Velcro model. Are they there all the time? And actually, if they are, then something like this could support them. And what we want to do here is support the child to self-scaffold. That's our top. We start from the top before going down through the model to correcting. So start from the top. Can they self-scaffold? Providing them with wait time. If they can't, right, let's provide them with a prompt. And then if they can't do that, again, waiting time in between, can we provide them with a clue? So supporting staff to do that. Are they familiar with this model? If not, this could be a good focus for teaching assistants and also for teachers, to then avoiding that correcting and avoiding the over-reliance on an adult. And a lot of that self-scaffolding, this leads me perfectly into the next slide, that self-scaffolding is what we want to develop through the cognitive and metacognitive strategies, the metacognition. I love this quote from Tony Buzan, who's an education specialist: learning how to learn is life's most important skill. So we often talk about metacognition after the scaffolding and explicit instruction, making sure that's well embedded. And then within that comes the metacognition of really supporting the student to manage their own learning and manage their own learning behaviours. I've got a picture of a pupil here of what do I want to do well? What do I know? What will I find difficult? What strategies can I use? And this would, we would want all pupils to be able to do this, all children, aware of their own learning and aware of what is happening when they're learning within the moment, within the classroom. So many children, as we know, children identified with SEND in particular, are over-reliant on an adult, and they find it difficult to think and work through a task independently. So we want to support them to become reflective learners who are aware of their thinking processes and what they bring to a task and what they need to do moving forward. And a lot of that, well, there's a circle that's not come up on this, but a lot of that, there should be a circle going around on the dial, is teachers being able to think aloud. So we start at the top with what do the pupils need to be able to do, and we move around in our cycle. So are teachers really thinking aloud and modelling the process, but also modelling challenges along the way, and also modelling what strategies are there to support them? Modelling mistakes. I've made a mistake here. What could I do to fix it? I can't think of how to start my sentence. I'm going to have a look at my sentence frames that I've got here, or I'm going to have a look at what's on the board. So really modelling those key steps and strategies as they go along. And thinking about those learners, because lots of pupils will be able to think metacognitively just from watching the teacher. But for many learners, especially those identified with SEND, we would need to be explicit with this with them, really scaffolding their metacognitive thinking. So you can see their sentence frames even say, my learning goal is to, what am I required to do today? What do I know? What do I bring to this? What do I need to find out? And what's available to me if I get stuck, or if something is tricky? Having question prompts there to keep that cycle going. What's my learning goal? What do I already know? What strategies are available to me? And having speaking frames are a really useful tool as well. So what sort of tools have you seen in your classroom? Are you seeing speaking frames in the classrooms? Are you seeing these taking place? So here you can see the curriculum toolbox that I've just gone through. And the importance is knowing your learners. This is what I know about them. These are their barriers. These are the strategies in my toolbox to help support them, to help them help the child overcome that barrier. We then move on to planning effective CPD, because this is the important part now. The strategies we want to give to them, but also the how do we apply these strategies in the classroom? How can we best support them? And first of all, it's identifying what strategies the teacher's using well. What are they confident in using? What are they not so confident in? So I've just put some questions there for child voice to find out from the children, how does your teacher help you to learn? And if you find something challenging in class, what do you do? Just to see if they've got those metacognitive strategies. And And then that staff voice, how confident are you in providing high quality teaching for pupils with SEND? How confident are you in deploying TAs within your classroom? So finding out what they feel their strengths and weaknesses are, not making assumptions just on our learning walks. Obviously, that's a big part of it, going in and watching, but also asking the teachers themselves and asking the children, what does learning look like for them in the classroom and how are they best supported? This is a useful tool based on the 5 a day. It is a reflection tool that's provided by the EEF. And this would be really useful for subject leaders and all senior leaders to reflect on it within their subjects. There is also a teaching assistant one as well. So teachers could sit there and say, part of it looks at explicit instruction. Do you use succinct language in your classroom? And, are you breaking learning down into small steps? So that teachers can reflect on that and say, yeah, I'm doing that really well, or I'm not doing that quite so well. I need more support with this. And similarly, on learning walks, leaders can go around and make points against this tool as well. So again, it's not making those assumptions of what we need. And this is really key within the Ofsted new toolkit. They say that leaders have a nuanced understanding of the quality of teaching across subjects. This is one of the points, obviously not set in stone yet. It may well change in September. But there is that added focus of leaders knowing what's going on in the classroom, subject leaders, and driving improvements in the quality of teaching and looking at what teaching looks like for SEND. So this is a really useful tool, can be used on learning walks. And as I said, within staff training, you might sit in a staff meeting and then reflect on that themselves, on what does that look like. And used as observations. It may be a useful tool as a baseline for you now. If this is a piece of work that you're going into in September with a big focus on adaptive teaching, use this as a baseline now to see what are teachers doing effectively in their classrooms, what are the areas we need to really focus in on and tune in on. And then this is in the MPQ for SENCOs, and we thought this really useful to share with you because it's a fairly new document. The MPQ started as the official qualification for SENCOs last September. So, and it's important. It says in developing and sustaining an inclusive environment, the SENCO needs to work with other leaders to embed reflective practice, whereby the enablers to full pupil participation are proactively identified and implemented on an ongoing basis. So that SENCO working with other leaders and subject leaders is really key. And we provide training with SENCOs, and we often talk about SENCOs being the post-it note, having a post-it note suit on, covered with post-it notes, because it's often, I'm concerned about this child, or this has happened, or how can I support this? That actually it needs to be more strategic than that. There needs to be that wider, consistent approach across the school with other leaders, establishing and sustaining their curriculum, making sure there is that support there, that ongoing support for pupils with SEND, and that real, like in the Ofsted toolkit, spotlight on SEND throughout the school. Thinking about how class teachers should approach adaptive teaching in their subject, identifying effective teaching practices that can remove barriers to learning, like the ones I've just shown you in the strategies, and then planning effective CPD, that professional development for all your teachers, then planning it together. And we often take that model within our company. I've recently written a blog with our science advisor about vocabulary instruction. I'll provide you a link to it at the end. But we work together because I bring the SEND knowledge and skills, and she brings the science knowledge, and then we upskill each other, which is a great model to use within schools as well. This is, I think I put a link to it, just an article, and it's taken, the information is taken from the Perfect SENCO. I will send these slides to Jonathan after this. But it actually talks about the role of the SENCO, but I've put and subject leaders, that it's more than just telling. So if we think about those strategies in the toolbox, like the ones I've shown you, and they're just a snippet of strategies, we often have whole twilight sessions on just the strategies, or 3 twilight sessions on just the strategies. But then, like Margaret Mulholland said, we want to support the teacher in using and applying the adaptive teaching tools. They know their learners, they know the strategies in their toolbox. How can they effectively use and apply? So models such as joint planning, co-teaching and peer modelling. So if we think about joint planning, the subject leader spending time with teachers during their planning sessions provides a good opportunity for that joint discussion. So thinking about that, are there small steps? Have we anticipated the barriers that might come up? Have we anticipated misconceptions that might come up? And planning together can be a really useful tool. And then co-teaching. Often in the moment, a teacher is so busy with the class of 30, 31, possibly 32 children, that it's often really beneficial to have another leader in there. Often when we've been in classrooms, we can say, a writing frame would have really helped in that moment, just on the whiteboard, and we can support TAs with that. So subject leaders and senior leaders going in and co-teaching is a powerful tool, because it not only enables them to plan together, but also jointly deliver and evaluate the success of that lesson. How well did it go? What more was needed in that lesson? Did that child struggle, or did they do well? What strategies worked in that moment? Really reflecting on that practice. And then peer modelling. You may have the SENCO might carry out some demonstration lessons, or you might have a real champion of SEND in your school who really gets it right, or there's, really passionate about it and they are able to do it right in their classrooms. There might be a local school or schools near to you that have that high quality teaching, really embedded inclusive teaching. So teachers going and watching that and seeing the techniques that are being used can be really powerful CPD for them as well. So then I wanted just to show you here our blogs that we term as perfect bite-sized CPD, and these are written across our company. So I've put a QR code there for you to receive new blogs. If you sign up automatically in your inbox, you can see the one I've written with the science, and these are free to access. Developing inclusive classrooms, the magical power of words in a secondary science curriculum. So that explicit vocabulary instruction, and have a read of them, even if they say secondary, because lots of the strategies can be put across the curriculum, not just in science, but also in primary as well. You'll see the application in there of how, what can that vocabulary instruction look like in the classroom. And similarly there's a supporting pupils with SEND in the maths classroom as well. And there's all sorts in there. Transition we've got in there recently. So please access those. And how can we help? I've put some training there. They are fully funded within Hertfordshire, but if you email me, we can get you access it. They are a small cost, but we've made it that they are not extortionate for schools. So there is phonics training in there, and also science, and we have a primary science pathway and a secondary science pathway. I've put our SEND website link there as well, and my LinkedIn page, and email address, so please get in touch. We very much, support with conversations over the phone. We would love to be in touch with people wider than Hertfordshire and head teachers and schools. So please get in touch if we can support in any way. We very much look at, supporting that applying learning from our training in lessons and working with teachers there. And then I believe that is the end, which I'm hoping if there's any questions, Jonathan, or anything that might have come up.
That was absolutely brilliant. So much information in there, and it's going to be very useful for all our school leaders.
And I'm very aware it was a lot of information. So please, if there are any strategies you want to know more of, or anything, any tools that you want, we're very happy to email or send them. So please do get in touch.
So 2 questions has come up from James. One is, James is becoming a new head teacher in September. What would be the top priorities in the first year, especially around teaching and learning? Would you recommend him to focus on inclusive education?
In terms of inclusive, I would take that vision, really think about what do I want adaptive teaching to look like, and the key is you want evidence-based strategies within the classrooms. So take a model such as Send DEF 5 a day or Rosenshine's Principles of Instruction, and just really break that down with teachers of how confident are they in delivering that. And you might spend time in the first term just looking and observing and seeing what does the practice look like at the moment in lessons, and then just taking each bit. So start off with explicit instruction, because that is the skill set of the teacher, that modelling, that thinking aloud, that I do, we do, you do, and then adding that scaffolding within it. So I would start with those. Metacognition is one that it's so powerful. It can have up to 7 months. This is what the EF has found. But often teachers don't really understand it, and they're doing it implicitly anyway. They're often doing it subconsciously. So I would embed those scaffolds and the explicit instruction, really make sure teaching is of a high quality. Teachers are really aware of those barriers to learning that might be happening in the moment. They're noticing, they're tweaking with scaffolds, and then go on to your metacognition, really embedding that, right, we want to empower our learners to think through their plan and monitor and evaluate their learning.
Sounds great. I think it's sort of answered the next question. It's about culture. Same from James again. How do you build that culture of high expectation and inclusivity? But I think you sort of answered that in the last answer, really. So have you got any other tips or strategies for, it's about cultural change, isn't it, in the school as well? Making sure you're building that culture with all the staff.
It is. And it's very much that it's that vision set of where are we now? Where do we want to be? Where would we really want to be? And what are the difficulties that we're facing at the moment? So it may well be that it is that listen to teachers, that they may well say, I'm finding planning for my learners really hard, so then we're looking at curriculum. You might need to start at your curriculum actually and really make sure that teachers are really clear of the building blocks within the curriculum and the steps, and they're really progressive, so that they know, okay, so here are my learners within my classroom who are working with my age-related expectations. And I've got a learner here who is working 2-3 years below. But what does 2-3 years below look like? And how can I empower them to get there? So what are my building blocks to get them to where they need to be? And it could be that they've got a highly personalised curriculum because they've got quite significant needs, which is fine. That's absolutely fine. But again, the progression within their learning, that if we want inclusivity that's related to the learning that's going on in the classroom as well, so that they know what does that learning look like for them. And I think I had a lesson the other day. I was with a teacher, and she was doing time. What does hours, seconds and minutes look like with a year 2 classroom? But then she had children who were working at early years, who were quite, but I said, you can still look at, your timers, and what does that minute feel like, those feelings, and how can we go fast? How can we go slow? So we're still within that time, and they're still working on the same thing, but we're using concrete resources, and we're really unpicking and exploring, well, what does the learning look like for that child within this topic that I'm doing here within the lesson? So definitely.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that hour, and it really was insightful, and thank you very much for your time. Thank you for everyone for watching, and I hope you found it as useful as I did. And we're hopefully going to be doing more and more different webinars in the future. We got a few more.
I don't know whether that's me gone or Jonathan. But I'm just going to put my email address in the chat bar, so please get in touch at any time. Thank you.
I'm going to end the stream now. Okay. Thank you very much, Becky. I cut that bit out.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye.